Hi, this is Kevin Trainer, and I want to welcome you to the first of two demos that I'm going to do. On The first one is going to be using entities to modularize a document, an XML document, typically one used for publishing. And then once I finish that, I'm going to do a demo on how to do the same thing using the features of X-include. And I'm doing things a little different in the unit here. Instead of having a lecture that goes with slides, I'm just going to be doing the demo. And then your assignment is not going to be different than the demo because there's not a lot of kind of figuring out. It's all kind of practical practice. Okay. So to have you do the same thing that I'm doing, all the better. Okay. So it's all going to be pretty much rolled into one. Okay. So when you do the assignment, there'll be a write up on that and all that. But when you do the assignment, if you want to play the video and kind of follow along as you go, then that's certainly fair game. Okay. So we're going to do something else this week, which is I've talked about a feature that the Oxygen XML editor has called projects. And they're a really nice way to organize our work. So what I want to do is put our work in a project this week. Okay. And I'm working on the Mac, but I'm going to go and open up the Finder and go to Documents. And here's the folder for our class. I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call it underscore what is it going to be called? Entities and X-include. Okay? Because that's kind of what we're working on, right? And I'm going to open that up. And what I typically do is I keep the file that represents the project at a higher level in the file system than the files that hold, say, the XML or the DTD, or later on we're going to be having other kinds of files too. Okay, so this in the main directory is where I'm going to put the project file, but I'm going to put the the files. I'm just going to call this my files. Okay, and that's where the files are going to go. So what files are going to go there? Well, we're going to start with the file, two files that I have put up on the D2L under week 6 here. So let's get a look at that. Log in. And now we're going to go to our class. And if we go to content and we go to week 6, let's see, I've put up two files, an XML document and a DTD. So let's download the XML document. So we want to download it. And we just want to save the file. And on the Mac, when we do that, that document becomes available in this little downloads area. So I'm just going to drag that up and put it in that my files directory. Okay. And now I'm going to go back and I'm going to do the same for the DTD. I'm going to download the DTD, say that I want to save the file. And again, that's going to be down in that downloads area. And I'm going to bring that over and put it in my files directory. Okay? And now I can close the browser because I have everything off of the D2L that I need. And so let's take a look. So we have the sub directory, which is going to hold all of our working files for this week. We're just going to keep them in one directory. And I've called it My Files. And then if you go up a level, you'll see that we have an empty directory except for the subdirectory. And this is where we're going to put the project file. Okay, so how do we create a project file? Well, let's open up the Oxygen XML editor. And it's going to fire up. Okay. And for right now, I am going to close the extra windows. Oh, this is the project window, so we'll leave that there. Okay. So just close the extra window on the right. And I can go up to the menu and click on Project. I want a new project. Okay. And I'm going to call this project Entities and X-Include. Okay? And you don't have to put dot whatever. It's going to give it the right closing name. So let's just shrink this copy of Oxygen and take a look at what's happened in our, we've lost our virtual machine again. I hate that. I shrunk the wrong thing. Honey, I shrunk the virtual machine. Okay, so if we go to, if we go back to our entities and X-Include, oh, I haven't saved it yet. I'm sorry. This is the kind of stuff that you have to get right. So I've got the project here. It doesn't have anything in it, but I want to save it in the right spot. So how do we do that? Well, I can just say project, save project as, and then it's going to give me some places where I can put it. And let's go up. And I'm going to go to Documents, Info 780, and there's my directory that I want to put it in. And I want to put it inside the top level directory, but I don't want to put it in the directory that's going to hold all my files. I could, but it turns out that from my experience over the years, it's more convenient to have it up at a level all by itself. Okay? And now I'm going to click on Save, which you can barely see. And now if I shrink Oxygen, you should be able to see that we have this XPR file, which is an Oxygen project. Okay? All right, so let's do this. Let's close Oxygen. And of course, on the Mac, if you really want to close it, you have to go up to the menu and click on Quit Oxygen XML Editor, and it will close the whole thing. Okay? And so let's pretend now we want to work with our project. How would we do it? Well, we would do it by going to the directory that holds that project file and double clicking on it. So, okay, it's in this big directory. And now we've got this XPR file. And if we double click on that, it should open up Oxygen, and it should open the project in that left window. And there it is, okay? But there isn't anything in our project yet. All right. Now, one of the things that you can do to put things into a project is to include folders in a project. And I find that's probably the most helpful feature. So I make sure that I've highlighted the name of the project, and I right click, and I said I want to add a folder. And it shows me the directories, and the folder, it's going to hold all my files. It's just going to be called My Files. So I highlight that, click on Choose, and then I've got My Files. And when I click the little triangle to the left of My Files, I see the files that are in there. Now, what I like about these projects is that for right now, when we're not doing XSLT transformations, it really only helps us kind of keep our files organized and to be able to see them while we're working. Later on, when we're doing XSLT transformations, we will be able to use the files that are in the project in a really convenient way that works well for transformations. But for right now, it just allows us to see our files and to open them when we want to. So how do we open them? Well, if I want to open up Monolithic Book, I double click on it. And I've got to apologize because I'm working in a virtual machine here. And the fact is that my virtual machine and the Oxygen XML editor have a bad interaction that my double click gets lost. So I'm going to right click on it and say open. But you could double click if you wanted to, okay? Because you're not going to be running this in the same virtual machine that I am. Okay, and then the other thing I want to do is I want to open the DTD called book. And again, you can either right click and say open or double click if you don't have the problem that I have. Okay, so I've got a book, and this is the document we're going to restructure once with entities and once with the X-include approach. So for this first recording, we're going to do the entities. But let's look at what we're going to restructure. Okay, I call it Monolithic Book, and I call it that because it's just one big book file. Okay, it's not modularized. Okay, so what's the DTD? Well, book.dtd in the same directory. And of course, we can see it there. We've already opened it. Okay. The root element is book. Sub-elements are title, author, publisher, rights, and then we've got 3 chapters. So a chapter is in a chapter element. We have a chapter number element, which of course is 1 for the first one. And then we have P for paragraph elements. And so far, I think all of the chapters have got 4 paragraphs in them. And they have this fake Latin lorem ipsum text that graphic design people use as a placeholder for text, so you can get the look of text without having to come up with real text. Okay, so we're really not so concerned about the text as we are about the structure of the document here today. And so we don't have to have a message inside it. So we've got chapter 1, and then if we pull down, we'll see uh, another chapter. Well, we went right past chapter 2 and now we're on chapter 3. And if you look over on the left side here on the bottom, you can see that we do have an outline of our document. So you can see we have a book element, and within that we have a title, an author, a publisher, we have rights, and we have chapter, and we have an element that has the content 1, chapter 2, and then chapter 3. Now, this is a little bit of a help when we have a document that's this big, but it's a really big help when you have a giant document. Okay? So that's what we want to do. So what we want to do is we want to take this, this book, and we'd like to break it up into more than one file. And we'd like to do that using entities first, and then we'll take a break and go on to another recording, and then we'll use X-include. Okay, so what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to copy this book, monolithic book, and what I'm going to call it is I'm going to call it modular book using entities. Okay? The easiest way to do that is to go up to the menu and say File, Save As. It's going to save it into the same directory. Okay? And let's just call it modular book using entities. Okay? And let's say save. And you can see up on the tab, the name of the file has changed. So we are now editing modular book using entities. Okay, that's good. Now let's get a bunch of copies of things that we want. What are we going to put into these entity files? Well, I'm going to show you that we can put rights into its own file, maybe because we might want to share this among documents. Okay, so we might want to have the same rights copy in each one of our documents. And so we may just want to be able to copy in the wording for rights each time. Okay, so we're going to put that in its own file. That's kind of like boilerplate. Okay, now the next thing we want to put into its own file is we'd like to have a file for each of the chapters. Now, as a practical matter, this is a very helpful thing. It allows two possible use cases. One is where you have a single author, but the single author doesn't want to be working on the whole document at the same time. What the author wants to do is wants to work on, say, chapter 1 or chapter 2. They want to get that right, and then they want to move on to the next one. That's what I do when I'm authoring my courseware. Okay, so then we want a way to pull all the chapters together into a combined document. Okay, so up until yesterday, I was doing that with entity files, and as a way to get ready for the unit we're doing here, I converted my courseware platform to use X-include, and so now my current version, my new version, uses X-include. And so I've done it both ways now. But for me, even though I'm the sole author of the courseware, I don't want to, from a kind of a code management point of view, I don't want to have all of the chapters open at the same time. what I'd like to be able to do is I'd like to do one, say that's either final or in a certain state, and then I want to move on to the next one. The other use case that this sort of approach is good for is when you have more than one author. Okay, so if I'm going to write at chapter 1 and you're going to write at chapter 2, if we can't put the chapters into separate files, then we can't be authoring at the same time. Okay, so that's another thing that you get by breaking this up into separate files. So we're going to break this up into one overall file, a top level file, which will be an XML document. And then we'll have one that holds the rights. And then we'll have 3 for the chapters, one for chapter 1, one for chapter 2, one for chapter 3. And I'm going to tell you that as a practical matter, for me, the easiest thing to do is to start with this whole file, this what was originally called a monolithic book, okay? And, oh, by the way, I just want to demonstrate that monolithic book, which I will open again. I can't double click. This is monolithic book will validate using the DTD. So we go down and it says document is valid. Okay, so the combination of the XML document and the DTD is a valid combination. So right now I'm just going to close monolithic book. I'll close the DTD for now too. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to copy this thing from file to file to file. Now, when you do it, do you have to use the exact same names? No, so long as they all come together in a useful way, okay? So the first thing that we have is we have modular book using entities, and that's going to be our top level file, okay? So now we need a rights entity. So let's just take this and do a file, save as, and it's going to go into the same directory. Let's call it rights entity. All right. Okay, it's got all the text in it, so we're going to be taking text out. And then we want an entity file for each one of the chapters. So let's do a save as. So let's call this chapter 1 entity. All right. And let's do another file, save as. Call that chapter 2 entity. So change that 1 into a 2 and save that. And let's go up to the menu again and do another save as. And we'll make this chapter 3 entity. Okay. All right. So that's good. Now, I'm going to close all the tabs that I have here, and I want you to look over under the project, and you'll see, because when we created the project, the trick is to be able to have the files that you want in folders, okay? And then to include the folder in the project. Then as you add more files, they automatically appear. There's another feature where you're able to add individual files, but of course that's a pain because when you have a new file, you have to add it to the project. So what I do is I add the folder to the project, and then whatever files are in it are going to appear. So now we've got modular book using entities. Okay. Well, let's work on the entities first. Okay. So let's use this rights entity. What should be in that? Let's open it up. Sorry. I keep thinking I'm going to be able to double click on it, but I've got my virtual machine problem. And what's going to be in it? Is there going to be an XML declaration? Well, technically not, okay? Technically, these kind of entity files, which in official XML speak are called external parsed general entities, these are not XML documents per se. They're parts of XML documents. So they don't get an XML declaration, but they get this thing that looks exactly like it that's called a text declaration. So we're going to leave that top line there. Okay? Now, can we have a doc type? Can we point to a DTD for this? No, we can't. Okay, this is one of the reasons why people have gravitated away from using the entities approach. Although, I mean, there are plenty of projects around that are still using these external parsed general entities. For instance, MyCourseWare was using them up until yesterday morning. Okay, so knowing how to do them, because you might have to maintain something, is a good skill. So we can't use the doc type. We're going to get rid of that because that doesn't apply to an external parsed general entity. We can't use all this stuff other than rights. We just want a rights element in it. Okay. And then everything after the rights element, we're going to delete. So just go down the end of it and delete that. And what you'll see is that we have a file that has an XML declaration and one element that is a rights element that includes the text for rights. Okay, and we can save that. Now, are we able to validate it? No, we're not able to validate it because we can't have a doc type for an external parsed general entity. Can we check it for well-formedness? Yeah, we can. In this case, if we go down and we check it, it's going to come back as well-formed. Okay? Does it have to be well-formed? Well, the technical answer to that is no. Okay? It's possible to pull in multiple external parsed general entities. And the only requirement is when they're all pulled into the parent document, which we're going to learn how to do last. It's only when everything is assembled in there, then the result has to be well-formed. But as a general approach, having these things be well-formed in their own right is a good idea. Okay? So this approach we have here, sorry about the siren. Apparently we have some excitement going by. This approach we have here is a pretty good approach. Okay? So we've got rights. So we're going to close that. So let's go to chapter 1. Okay? And again, you're able to double click. I'm not. We're opening chapter 1. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to get rid of the doc type all the way down, but we're going to keep the chapter element. Okay. And now at the end of chapter 1, we're going to delete the rest of it. So let's delete the rest. get rid of it. So now we just have a chapter. Okay. And why don't we save it? And why don't we check it for well-formedness? Now, I think I probably told you, if you look over on the right-hand side, you can see where the red spots are. We've got errors in the document. And this is because we started out with a document that pointed to a DTD schema. And of course, when we took out some of those, we took out some of the document, we created some errors, okay? Now, if we just go up here to the check mark and take the drop down and check it for well-formedness, we'll see that those will go away. So it knows then that it doesn't have a schema. If we try to validate it, it's going to say the validation failed because we don't have a schema, okay? But if we try to check it for well-formedness, which is all it's supposed to have, and really even technically it doesn't have to have that, the result when we pull them into the parent document has to be well-formed, okay? So that's chapter 1 entity. It's in good shape. Let's do the same thing to chapter 2 entity. Open that. And again, I'm going to take the doc type all the way down before the chapter. Oops, sorry about that. Don't know what I did there, but got the right result. Nope, sorry, I didn't. So I want to get rid of chapter 1. Of course, the way you do this is going to depend on what your preferences are. You could also copy the chapter 1 entity document and change the number in it to 2. That would get the same job done. And I would say that for this kind of work, there's no extra credit for doing things the hard way. So any tricks you have for cutting and pasting things or copying one thing to clone it into the next, as long as it has a proper value when you're done, the less work you do, the more clever you are. Okay, so that's well-formed for chapter 2 entity. And now we're going to open chapter 3 entity. And we're going to take out the doc type. And we're going to take out all of the text and the markup all the way down to the beginning of chapter 3. So chapter 1 is going, chapter 2 is going, and now we're going to get down and we're going to get rid of all that. And then we have to remember to get rid of the end book tag. Okay, so let's go back up to the top. Got one more blank line that I like. And I'm going to save this and check it for well-formedness. Okay, so if you accept the fact that I know what I'm doing, which I know is a bit of a leap, but I think I do, these external parse general entities we want to pull into a parent document, they're all taken care of. Okay? All right, that's good. Let's close chapter 3 entity because we can. Okay? And let's open modular book using entities. And here's where I really like the project. It's right over on the left. For me, I just really like to see the files I'm going to be working with. And again, that's just a convenience now, but it's a much larger convenience when we move on to transformations, and we want to do that inside of Oxygen. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to replace text with these things called entity references. Now, it turns out that we've been using a kind of an entity reference so far when we use that character string that we put in instead of the ampersand and the character string that we put in instead of the less than. Okay, so let's get rid of rights here, and let's put a character string expression that looks like the ones that we've been using. It turns out that we can actually create these entities ourselves. So let's just call this one rights, and a semicolon at the end. Okay? Now, the only problem is that that's not defined. Okay? So that would be great. It would bring in the rights if we knew that the character string was associated with a certain file. Now, how do we do that? Well, we do it in the DTD. Okay, so stay with me here, because we could put a line in the DTD that we're pointing to now, book.dtd, all right? And that would be helpful because it would get the job done. We could define this rights entity file, but it doesn't take a lot of thinking about this before you realize that you don't want to put it in the general DTD, because you would like to be able to use book.dtd as the DTD schema for a lot of books, okay? And of course, in different books, as you modularize them, they're not going to be including the same files. Well, they might for rights, but they're not going to be including the same chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, okay? So what you probably want to do with these text files that you are, and I don't want to say including because that gets us to the word that's part of X include, but I'll say pulling in. These text files that you're pulling in, it turns out that you can have part of the DTD can be internal to your XML document. Well, how do you do that? In fact, the whole DTD can be internal to your XML document, but typically we only do that for times when we are developing a new DTD. And when you have a product like Oxygen, and you can edit the XML document and the DTD document side by side, I really tell people just to go right to external DTDs. So this internal part, okay, we can use subsets of the DTD, okay? So right now, this thing that we're pointing to with DocBook book system, that means look in the system for a file in the same directory called book.dtd. This points to the external subset of the DTD. Now we can have an internal subset as well. Now, where do we put that? Well, we put it in the document, and we put it between an opening square bracket and a closing square bracket. Okay, now we can put any DTD code that we want to inside of here. All right, how could we do that? So let's declare an entity. Sorry, didn't think I was on that line. So let's declare an entity. And the only thing that I don't like about putting it in the XML document is we don't get auto completion. If we were inside the DTD and we were typing this, we would get all the auto completion help if we were in book.dtd, but when we're in an XML document, we don't get auto completion for the DTD language, so we have to remember it. So it's all caps entity and then we're going to put the name without the ampersand and the semicolon, rights. Okay, and this is in an external file, so we have that keyword system again, and then we have in quotes, we have the name of the file, so it's rights underscore entity.xml. So rights underscore entity.xml. Okay, and all of these DTD language statements end with a greater than. Okay. So entity is misspelled. So now it's okay. All right. So this should work. What this should do is bring rights in right where it's supposed to be. So let's do this. Let's validate it. It says it's valid. Well, let's make sure it's not just lying to us. Let's say if we toggle rights, this entity reference, if we toggle that into a comment, okay, if we didn't get the benefit of that, would it still be valid? And by the fact that it's underlined chapter, I know already that it won't. But let's go back up and click on the check mark. And it's going to say unexpected element chapter. We were expecting, well, it really was expecting rights. Okay. Now, if we untoggle this, toggle comment again, and come back, and you'll see the underline on chapter went away, and we'll save it and validate it. You'll see that that works. All right, that's good. Now, how do we know that the thing is really there? Well, let's do this. Let's shrink Oxygen for a minute. Okay, and let's go into My Files. Okay, and the big file here is modular book using entities. Let's right-click on that and open with Safari. Let's look at the XML document in a browser. Well, that wasn't what we were expecting. That's not good at all. Aren't you surprised about that? So let's go back to Oxygen and make sure we save that big file. We did. Well, it's always good to do a live demo. So let's try to open that book with another let's go to applications and let's look for Firefox. Okay. Recommended applications. Choose an application. I don't know why I can't see Firefox. Well, that's bad. So we're going to pause this while I fix the problem. Get ready for a pause. Well, hello. Here we are. We paused and now we've resumed, and I can only say that you should be glad that you have not been with me this whole time, because I was exploring a number of things that were not behaving the way they used to behave. And I found a workaround, and I'm going to be showing that to you. So you will remember that when you open an XML document in a browser, that sometimes it will show you one thing, sometimes it will show you another. It depends on the browser and the settings for the browser. Okay. What happens if we take a document like the monolithic book that has all the content in it and we know it, right? So let's open that. And so that has the rights element in it explicitly, right? What happens if we take that and we say we want to open it in a browser, which there's just to the right of the toolbar button that you use to format and indent is one with the globe on it that says open in browser. So we're going to click on that. And what we're going to see is that in these circumstances with this Safari browser that I have, what you get is you just get the content of all of the elements. So we don't see the tags. What we see is the content of all of the elements, and that's kind of healthy. Now, it's a little bit hard to learn how to read through all that, but if you take a look at this, we see the title, A Book for Practicing. We see the author, Kevin Trainer. We see the publisher, Legend Press. And then we see the beginning of the rights language. This work is licensed under the Creative Commons Attribution 4.0 International License, etc. And then at the end of that, we can see the beginning of chapter 1. There's a 1, which is the chapter number, and then we have the content of the paragraphs. If we come down far enough, we can see that there's a 2 right there, and then the contents of paragraph 2. And then if we come down here, we can see that there's a 3 and the contents of paragraph 3. Okay, so all that content's there, and that all works fine. All right, so let's close the browser, and let's close monolithic book. Okay, so if you remember, what we just did to modular book is we took out the markup and the text for rights, and we replaced that with a reference to an external parse general entity called rights entity.xml. And you would think that if the parser that's used in the browser was smart, that we would see the same text now if we were to open this document in the browser. So let's test that. Let's open it in the browser. And it's a little bit hard to read again, but if you look, we see the title, A Book for Practicing. We see the author, Kevin Trainer. We see the publisher, Legend Press. We don't see the rights information. We go right into chapter 1. And why is that? We were expecting it to pull in this external parsed general entity. Well, it just so happens that browsers are very lazy because they keep trying to make them faster and faster, and they make them lazier. And so there isn't any requirement that the parser that's used by the browser, there's no requirement that it go fetch external entities. Okay, which isn't a problem because we typically don't want to serve these things up as XML documents. What we typically want to do is to take an XML document like this and we want to transform it using an XSLT transformation, and then we'll get all of the data pulled in because we'll be using a parser that resolves the references to entities. Okay? So for right now, you have to take it on faith that this content that we're pulling in from the entities is really winding up in the document in a constructive way that would make sense when we ran a transformation. And what I did while I had you guys on hold is I wrote a little transformation that we're eventually going to be able to use to test our rights, our modular book using entities, and we'll also be able to use it to test our modular book using X include. Okay? And since that is probably the most advanced thing that we're going to do, I'm going to do it at the end of each of the demos so that if you don't feel up to it, you don't have to do it. And what I've done is I wrote that little test transformation and I put it up on the D2L. So we'll bring that down when the time comes. Okay? But trust me, I've run the transformation and I can see that the text for rights is in the XML document when you use a proper parser. It doesn't work with the parser that's part of Safari, which is, again, one of the reasons that displaying XML documents directly on the web, it might have been an idea that people thought had promise in the early days of XML, maybe around 1999, 2000, 2001. But it really hasn't turned out to be a common practice. What people do is that they create these single source publishing XML content documents like the one we have here, and then they transform them using an XSLT style sheet, and what comes out is HTML, and then that result they put on the web. Okay? The fact that the browser isn't able to resolve these entities is a pain in our butt for seeing the fruits of our labor in this class, but it's not a problem for the workflow that we're going to be using. Okay? So now what do we need to do? We need to replace the chapters. So let's take out chapter 1. Okay? We're just going to come down here. And that's the first chapter, so I'm going to delete it. And I'm just going to put an entity reference, ampersand, chapter, _1. Okay? And that's unresolved. So let's go up. And let's white type something in when you can copy paste. So let's copy the declaration we had for the rights entity. Okay, let's get ourselves a blank line in between and paste that. And we don't want rights. This one's going to be chapter 1. Chapter _1. And here's where it really helps to have the project again. What did we call that? Well, we called it chapter1entity.xml. So this is going to be not rightsentity.xml. This one's going to be, didn't want to lose my quotes, chapter1entity.xml. Oh, that's great. And as long as we're here and we know we're going to need chapter 2 and 3, let's clone this 2 times. So we're going to copy that one. Okay. And we're going to copy it again. And we're going to change chapter 2. And remember to change it in the name of the entity and also the name of the file that it's associated with. I can't tell you how many times I've done one and not the other. Chapter 3. Chapter 3. Okay, and we've got that. All right. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of chapter 2 and 3 markup. So we're going to come all the way down to the bottom. That's chapter 2. Now chapter 3. Go to the end of chapter. We still need an end tag for book. Okay. But what we can do is let's clone this. Okay. So let's have this here. And let's put another one there. And let's put another one down below it. And just change their name. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3. Okay? So let's see that. So let's, first of all, let's see if it still validates. It does still validate. That's great. Okay. And again, let's take a look at it. What happened if we just looked at the document in the browser? Well, let's go up and click on the piece of paper with the globe. And oh, there's hardly any content left at all, because all of the content that is coming out of these external entities is not being pulled in by Safari when it's displaying in XML document mode. Oh boy, that's really depressing. Well, it's a good thing we don't want to use the browser to display XML directly, because, as I said before, it's an idea that never really caught on. Okay? So we've got that. Now I'm almost ready to bring in the little transformation to prove that we really do have all this text in the document. But before we do that, I want to show you one more entity idea. Okay? And that's the following thing. Let's look at publisher. Okay? There are times in when we are writing a document that we have a name that we want to use a lot within the document. And this is probably less true with a novel, but more true with something like a technical manual. So let's say we're writing a technical manual for the standards for the systems at the School of Information Studies at UWM. Okay, and so we've got the name of some organization, and right now it's called the School of Information Studies. Well, before it was called SILS, not SOS. And I'd like to tell you before I'm gone, I'm hoping I'm around long enough that they'll change the name again. They'll say, Information Studies is sounding a little dated. Maybe we'll just call it the School of Information. I think that's what they do at Michigan or North Carolina or something like that. So how do you deal with the fact that the name of your organization could be changing all the time? Well, it's possible to create an expression that is a general entity. It's an internal general entity. So let's just say it's going to be @org name. Okay? So that's the publisher. Now, in our particular document, we don't repeat it. So there's no real benefit of using this kind of idea, but it's certainly something that we could do. So how do we get that to resolve? Well, we do it with an entity, but it's just a little different. Okay? Let's copy the last of the entities that we created. Okay. And let's say that the name of the entity is org name. Okay, that's good. You can still see that it was unresolved until then. Then the red underline went away. It's not external, so we don't have system. So we get rid of that keyword. And what we do is we just put into the double quotes, we put the phrase or word or character string that we want to be placed everywhere in the document where we use that entity reference to the entity org name. So I had Ligent Press. Okay. So what's going to happen is that it should say publisher Ligent Press. Okay. All right. So now we have 4 external parsed general entities. We have 1 internal general entity. And all of those should be pulled in and replaced in the text with their counterparts that have the real text in them, provided that we're using a parser that is full service, unlike the parser that we get when we open up Safari. So let's open up Safari again and see what we've got. Well, interestingly enough, the internal entity was resolved. So it does say Ligent Press still, even though we used an entity, but those external entities is too lazy to open the file. It did read the DTD because it was able to pull that internal entity Ligent Press out of there and do the replacement, but it was too lazy and read that as too performance-minded to open up those external entities. Okay, so here we are. We're finished with the first part of what's going to be your assignment. We took the monolithic book, which had the DTD book.dtd, right? And then we did a lot of copying of monolithic book because we used it to form modular book using entities. And then we, I want to get rid of this HTML file because you're not supposed to see that yet. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Remove that from the disk. Okay. When we do the transformation, we're going to create that. Okay. So modular book using entities. Okay. It still uses the same old DTDs. So if we look at modular book using entities, it still doesn't have to change the external subset of the DTD. Okay. What it does, though, is it creates an internal subset by adding this square bracket expression after the external subset reference. And we have defined 4 external parsed general entities and 1 internal general entity. Okay? And that's how we did it, right? Now, did we have to call the entity files exactly the names that we did? No, we didn't. Okay. And in fact, when you do your assignment, if you choose some different names, as long as they're sensible names, I don't care. But you have to, when you do these definitions of these external parse general entities, you have to make sure that the proper file name gets in between the quotation marks. Okay? All right, so this is as far as you have to go when you do your own assignment. But then I want to say, well, what if you're a little concerned that when you open the document with the Safari browser, that you don't see most of the comment that Kevin really says is there, but we can't see it because the browser is to either lazy or performance oriented, depending upon your point of view. Okay? Well, how would we be able to see what's really in the document if you use a proper parser? Well, we could do our first XSLT transformation, okay? And this is a little test. I'm going to see how you guys do when we talk on Tuesday night. I'll see how many people this worked for and how many people it didn't, okay? But the first thing we need to do is we need to get the code that we're going to use to do the transformation. So let's shrink this application here, and let's go to the go to D2L, to our course on D2L, and let's cancel out of that. Okay, and let's refresh our page. And you'll see that under week 6, I now have a third file to download from. It's called Test Transform 1, and it's an XSLT style sheet for testing. Okay, so I just want to go to that and say that I want to download it. And I want to save the file. And again, on the Mac, it comes down, it's in this little downloads thing. Okay, and then I also have to have a place to drag it. So let's open up our, let's open up the directory that we're working in, entities and Xinclude. And we're putting everything into my files, if you remember. So what we want to do is we want to take this XSLT transformation called Test Transform 1. We just want to drag it into the directory. Okay, so that should be in our project now too. Well, let's go look. I'm going to close that browser because I'm not going to need it again. And I'm going to open up the modular book. I'm going to open up Oxygen, where we're looking at the modular book using entities.xml. And let's look at my files. Okay. And I don't see the XSLT there, but I bet if we say that we want to refresh that thing, it will show up. Sorry, I think I have to put my cursor on the directory and say I want to refresh that directory. Yep, there it is. So it showed up at the bottom, Test Transform 1. Okay, so here's where I'm going to see whether I'm able to explain this to you. But when you have XML documents and you have XSLT style sheets, you can pair them together in a sort of a mix and match, okay? If you take a given XML input document and an XSLT transformation style sheet, you should get a deterministic result, okay? Now, typically what we're going to be doing when we're using these style sheets is we're going to be pulling the data out of the input XML document, and we're going to be putting it into the output HTML page, okay? And it turns out that that's what this test transform does. Let's take a look at that. Open it up. I can't double click. Okay. And so I'm going to close the window on the right. And I put a comment that explains that this is a very simplistic transformation, okay? The code we have here, there's a template, and the template catches the very top of the XML document. And when it does that, it inserts sort of the skeleton of an HTML page. And then we only have one real instruction that does work. And what that says is go through the XML document and flush out all the content in all of the elements. So what we should see is we should see a very simple HTML page that has the title Test Transform 1 Output. And then in the body, we should see what we were seeing in Safari when we opened the original monolithic book document. We should just see all the content from inside all of the elements. Of course, that didn't work anymore once we put a lot of the content into external entities. But it should work the same here because this uses a parser that's not lazy. It uses a parser that's been told, I want to resolve the entities. Okay? So what we should get when we run this transformation is an HTML page that looks a lot like the way that the monolithic book looked when we opened it. Okay, so what we have here is we have an XML document on the left, and we've got a transformation on the right. And how do we associate them with each other? Well, we do it in the following way. Click on the XML document, okay, and then go up to the toolbar, and to the right of the red play button is a wrench. And it has a little play button underneath it. So that's configure transformation scenario. So we're going to click that. Okay. And we don't have any defined. So let's say new. And we get to pick the top one, XML transformation with XSLT. Okay, and it automatically gives it the name of our XML document. Well, we don't want that. So let's just call this, I'm going to call this Test Transform 1. And I'm going to use different typography here so you know that it's not just the same name. And here, it says we're on the tab. There are three tabs. One is the XSLT options. The other one is the XSLFO options. We're not going to use them until the end of the course, so that there's no check in the box for Perform FO processing. So we're going to skip over this. And then the output is the output options. So first of all, we want to make sure on the XSLT options that we have the right input XML document. And this is an expression that we get automatically here called current file URL. So that means use as input the document that we have highlighted right now. And then what's going to be the XSL or XSLT style sheet? Well, if I click on the little file folder, it'll show me all the different things I could choose. And there's only one that is an XSL file, Test Transform 1. So I'm going to take that, highlight it, and click on Open. All right. Now it turns out that this transformer is this selects the XSLT transformation engine that we're going to use. And by default, the oldest and cheapest and least capable one is picked. So I want to take the drop down here, and I want to pick the one right above it, Saxon PE 9.5.17, because this is the biggest and the most expensive one. It just happens to come with Oxygen. So I want to pick that. And that has all the options we're going to need for the style sheet that we have. Okay, so that's it for this tab. Again, we pick the file, that has the XSLT in it, we had populated already the XML input file, and then we had to go down and change this transformer to be, we didn't have to pick the highest level one. This is professional edition 9.5.1.7, but this does every XSLT feature known to man, okay? And then, of course, we have to go to output. And we're going to say, well, after the transformation, there's going to be an output file. It's going to be an HTML file. So what are we going to call it? Well, I'm going to be kind of fancy here. If I click on this thing with the arrow and the 3 dots, it'll put in these editor variables. And I want to pick the 1, 2, 3, 4th one down, $CFN, the current file name without the extension. And then I just want to type asterisk .html. So what it's going to do is it's going to take the file name from the XML file and it's going to reuse it and create an HTML file with the same file name but a different extension. And then I also want to check the box that says open in the browser. So I want to do that. So now that's all I want to do here. Say OK. Okay, test transform 1. Let's say apply associated. And it's going to run the transformation and it's going to open it in the browser. And look, all that stuff that had gone away because the Safari browser was not reading in all of the entity files has come back. So we've got the title, A Book for Practicing. We've got the author, Kevin Trainer. We've got the organization, Legend Press, the publisher. Then we have the licensing text, and then we have chapter 1 and chapter 2, and somewhere down here, chapter 3. Okay? So by doing this transformation, I can see that it's all here. Now, is this a proper page? No. We just wanted to see that all of our content was there. When we learn how to do these XSLT transformations, we'll have a much longer transformation program, and we'll pick out parts and we'll surround them with HTML tags, and we'll get a really pretty output when we're done. But for just being able to prove to ourselves that all the content is available, this does the job. And just to show you yet one more feature of the Oxygen XML editor, if we have these files in a project like we do, okay, and we have associated a transformation scenario with the XML document, which we just did, okay? Because we associated this test transform 1, right? Then once it's associated, we just have to hit the red play button and it'll run it again, okay? So once we learn to do these transformations, what we're going to be doing is we'll be changing either the content in our XML document, or we'll be changing the programming in our transformation style sheet or program, whatever we call it. And then we'll just go back to the XML document that we've already associated with the style sheet and just hit play. And it transforms it that fast. Okay? So we're coming to the end of demo 1. I'm sorry for it being as long as it is. And I don't know how long it is because I took a big pause in there to do the workaround. But when you do your work, you'll be doing the same thing I did. And again, you can choose the names of the files the way I did. You can do it exactly in the order that I did, or you can do something that's equivalent, okay? And then when you're done, I'm going to want you to take all the files and the directories, including the top level directory that includes the project, and zip it up and submit it. Now this would be worth it. Let's close. Let's just look at one more thing. Let's close this. And project, can we close the project? No, but I think we can actually close the project by closing the window. Okay, and we'll close this little transformation window down here. So we have this completely empty. Okay, so let's go to the file system and let's ask ourselves, what would happen if we were up in the file system and we wanted to work with the project again? Well, we just go to the directory that it's in, we open it up, and then if we double click on the project file, okay, it'll open up our project and it's right there. And of course, all the files are there because we did it not by adding each individual file to the project, but by adding the directory to the project. So we have everything here, including test transform. And something that's really cool, if we open up, oh, by the way, the result of the transformation was this modular book using entities.html. It put it right in the same directory too. So in fact, if we open that up, sorry, I can't double click. If we open that up, we're going to see the content that's in the HTML page. Okay, it's just the content that was in the elements. Okay, it's kind of nice to see that. And if we look at that in the browser, we see what we were expecting there. Okay, but one of the cool things is when you have associated a transformation scenario with one of your XML files, you can simply open it up. Open up the XML file. And it remembers from the information in the project, it remembers which style sheet is currently associated with it for transformation. So you can just hit the play button and it does the transformation, which is really nice. Okay, so we're going to explore that more when we get to XSLT, but this is a preview that we had to resort to because otherwise we wouldn't be able to prove to ourselves that we really did have all of our content in the document. So that's it for the demo on entities. I'll be back shortly with the demo on X-Include. Bye for now.